You only need to remember one important fact about Memory Match for the Atari 2600. I already forgot what it was. It doesn't matter, because if you want to play an old school memory game, you get Matchmaker for the Magnavox Odyssey 2. And avoid Memory Match at all costs. Or a game of concentration. It's tricky because they're the same game with different names. Memory Match is the Sears Telegames version. And as you can see on screen, although the concept of Memory Match is quite exciting, and I like memory games, the execution here is horrific. For starters, the sound effects make you want to run to an air raid shelter as fast as possible. I can't stand the way that the numbers flash from the left side of the screen to the right side of the screen. If you've ever played Matchmaker on the Magnavox, or if you've seen my review of Matchmaker for the Magnavox Odyssey 2, when you play on the Magnavox, it has a nearly full-size keyboard built into the game console, which makes gameplay a lot more fun. You're playing against the clock. Here in Memory Match, you're simply playing either against a friend or against yourself for the lowest score. So you have as much time as you want to play the game and to listen to those horrible sounds. The Atari keyboard controller, as interesting as it may be, is very clumsy. You type in the numbers and then you hit the number sign on the keyboard controller, and that enters the number. Gameplay is fairly simple. It's like the old game Memory that you could play with cards. When you enter a number, it uncovers that block. You see an image, and then you try to match that image with where the other image is under a different block. I could have used fewer words to describe that. The imagery that you're trying to match here on the Atari is fairly interesting. You have birds, a ladybug, UFOs, sailboats, table and chairs, which is my favorite, and that creepy guy's face. There's a couple versions of the game that have wild cards, which aren't terribly wild. And you have a choice between playing on a 16-block playing field or a 30-block playing field. I feel like I'm being especially harsh towards Memory Match. It's not that this is a bad game concept. It's just very difficult to play this after you've played the far superior Matchmaker on the Magnavox Odyssey 2, both of which came out about the same time, in the late 1970s. I think that deep down I'm actually glad to see the Magnavox Odyssey 2 have a game that thoroughly crushes the competing Atari cartridge, because for the most part Atari 2600 games, which were more of the arcade-style games, were better than Magnavox Odyssey 2 games. And I've always felt that the Magnavox Odyssey 2 had its strengths and was actually a terrific game console with untapped potential. So I'm happy to recommend the Magnavox Matchmaker instead of Memory Match. In conclusion, I would steer clear of Memory Match, but you may not get a choice. You might end up with this game, and let me tell you how. This is the kind of game that you would get by accident in a lot of Atari 2600 games that you win on eBay, because it's illegal to throw away Atari cartridges, so you could easily see people slipping Memory Match into other lots of Atari games. Like if you win a lot of, say, Sword Quest Waterworld, Yar's Revenge, Ikari Warriors. So rather than just throwing away Memory Match, the person shipping it to you will just slip it into the box. And then when you open it, you'll be like, what the heck, I didn't order Memory Match, and I don't even have the keyboard controller to play this game. But inside, that Memory Match cartridge will be smiling, because it just pulled one over on you. You now have an obligation to care for and provide shelter to that Memory Match Atari 2600 cartridge. So be careful, because tucked away in that same package could be a copy of E.T., and then you'd really be screwed.